Welcome to Business Beyond the Mic, where we join Carly Van Heerden, CEO and founder of We Edit Podcasts. Together, let's uncover the art of podcasting.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Business Beyond the Mic. I'm your host, Carly Van Heerden. Today on the show, we welcome Jennifer Barcelos and Sandy Connery. Jeni and Sandy are the co-founders of the marvelous software platform and the And She Coaching Co. They are also the co-hosts of the incredible podcast And She Spoke, where they give listeners an insider's peek into the strategies and mental resilience it takes to create and run 6- and 7-figure online businesses. As OG podcasters, these women have so much wisdom to add to our knowledge of podcasting. Sandy and Jeni are on a mission to change the statistics that only 2% of female entrepreneurs will ever earn $1 million by chronicling their journey and sharing their proven playbook. During our episode, we dive into what does it mean to be an authentic podcaster and how to approach those bold topics that we're often even scared to say out loud. They also share their desire to continue to up the caliber of their content and why it is so crucial to actually create something that moves people and changes their lives. From there, we uncover why in this content-driven world, it is important to practice being okay with any type of reaction that you're going to get, whether good or bad. In fact, they encourage podcasters to step away from perfectionistic thinking and allow themselves to be bad at content creation in the beginning of their journey. Now, we have barely scratched the surface of all the incredible insights that they have to share, so make sure not to miss out on this episode. Now, without further ado, let's jump into the conversation. Jeni and Sandy, welcome to Business Beyond the Mic. It is incredible to have you both on the show.
Hi, thank you. We're excited.
Well, you guys are such an inspiration to me. I mean, founders of multiple 7-figure businesses, empower women in the industry. I mean, just crushing everything that you're doing. And of course, the most amazing podcast host. I mean, I get so enthralled in your episodes that I don't even remember where I am, what I'm doing, because I'm just focused on what you're saying. So why don't you guys kick it off for us and just start by telling a bit more about yourselves, your business, your brand, and of course, your podcast.
Sure. So I'll start. This is Jeni, and we have two businesses. We used to only have one, and then about a year ago, we split them apart. So now we run two companies. The first company is called Marvelous, and it's an online teaching platform that allows creators, coaches, wellness enthusiasts to teach, train, and coach online. And then our second business is called And She, which is a coaching and course-driven business to help women succeed and make 6 figures and beyond.
And then our podcast is And She Spoke, and we just have so much fun. It is what we live for. It is our favorite part of the week, and it promotes what we do in our businesses. And it's just it's something that I think if we had to burn everything down, the first thing we would recreate is our podcast.
Oh my gosh. See, that's inspiring because people are always focused on their business and growing that. But the joy that comes from doing podcasting and the community that you find in there, just connecting with other people, talking about what you love is just incredible. So I just was thinking along those lines, what inspired you guys to launch the podcast? What were those initial thoughts when you were going through okay, let's pull the trigger, let's do this?
It was so long ago. So we launched our first show in 2016, I think in early 2016. So I think it was mostly as a way to grow our business and just to get our ideas out into the world. And it was really still the infancy of podcasting back when we started. And I think it worked really well. We built an entire community and audience and nurtured them really well through that first podcast.
I don't know that we came at it with a huge strategy other than let's start a podcast. It just felt like a fun project, and there's two of us in the business. We're talking all the time, and it felt like a very natural fit. I don't know that if I didn't have a partner that I would start a podcast by myself. I'm not sure that I'm that type of person that could hold an episode by myself. So the fact that we're always bouncing ideas around it just felt like a really natural thing to do. We're both fans of podcasts. And so it was a very easy decision to go ahead with that.
Also, Carly, I think one important thing I just remembered is that we kind of met each other because of a podcast. So we met each other in an entrepreneurship program around building software companies. And we both had joined that program back in the end of 2013 because we listened to the founders on a podcast, on the same episode of a podcast, which was Pat Flynn's Smart Passive Income podcast. And so like we ended up meeting each other because of a podcast. So that's also part of our origin story.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Because, yeah, that just builds right into who you are in the end then. Did you guys face a lot of challenges starting, or did you find it was like a smooth, simple, this is what we're going to do, here's the path, let's go for it then?
I mean, I think it was easy. I mean, from my perspective, it's always been sort of like the fun, easy part of what we do. Like we do lots of really hard things growing a tech company and kind of like all the other things we've taken on in life. And like the podcast has always been like the fun kind of like recess in our business, in my perspective. I don't know, Sandy, if you would agree.
No, for sure. And I think like, I know a lot of people get sort of hung up on the technology of podcasting and setting it all up. And for us, like, I think we're both very technical. And so that was never a challenge. And that was, I mean, it's so easy today. Back then it wasn't quite. So we did follow Pat Flynn's how to set up a podcast, blog post. I remember doing that, but no, it wasn't hard at all to get started.
That's really good to hear, because the thing is, like, I've had a few podcasters on here, like some people that weren't even in the entrepreneur space and they start podcasts. So for them, it's totally new. But like you said, you guys knew all the things about tech. And I mean, it's out there on blogs, how to start a podcast. You can find it on gazillion places. So it's not hard. But yeah, it's just like, if you don't have that obstacle of, I'm going to do this, this is just tech, I'm going to keep going in this direction, it's actually quite easy, like you said. But did you guys, with no strategy, like you're saying, you just like flew into it, was there anything you wish you knew before you launched then? Or are you guys quite happy with the way it's been going?
I wish we had released episodes more frequently early on because of when we got started and the timing of podcasting. I think we could have grown our show much bigger, much more quickly had we released episodes more than once a week. And I also wish that we had a very kind of like artistic, esoteric approach to podcasting, especially for the first 50 episodes. And like we gave every episode like a single word name, and it was kind of serious. And like Sandy drew all the artwork, and it was like this very much artistic self-expression exercise. So we really probably weren't being very strategic. And because of the timing of like 2016, I wish we had maybe been a little more strategic, because we could have probably grown a really giant show and giant audience if we had done that. We've had periods of time where we've had 2 episodes a week and other periods of time where we haven't. We've mostly been a 1 episode a week show. And obviously when we had 2 episodes a week, our download numbers were much larger. It's just we were running a software company and now we run 2 companies. And so like for us, it hasn't made sense to have 2 or 3 episodes a week. But I certainly think if we had the bandwidth, that would have been great, just because of like, you always want more downloads. And I think people get addicted to the show when you're more frequent, and that just becomes more a part of the cadence of their daily lives. And so it's just like, you're sort of that like reliable resource, like they can tune into every other day or something. So if you have the time and bandwidth and you're listening to this to do multiple episodes in a week, like I certainly, if I were starting over, I would seriously consider it.
And Jeni, remember when we started, it was back in the day of Entrepreneur on Fire, and John Lee Dumas was doing like a podcast a day, remember? And he was just huge. And I remember thinking like, that is such a smart, I mean, it's so much work. I think he recorded them all in one day and then he just dripped them out over the week. It was just like, that's such a smart strategy, because his downloads and his listenership just exploded. And I was like, oh, we should have done that. So yeah, I agree with that. That's the one thing I would change too.
Yeah, that was back when I basically started this company too.
Is that right?
Yeah, in 2015. So just around that. And some of our clients, there were a few that came on strong in the beginning and they just committed. They said, yeah, I'm going to do 7 episodes a week, and reproduce those. And they did really well. And then after a while, their show's been grown and now they're happy. And they're like, sure, we're going to scale down like 5 episodes a week and then 3. And now they can kind of just do it as they want to. But I do find that if they go lower than, the 1 a week or 2 a week, it does dramatically affect your downloads too. But Yes. My point always is consistency. If you can't commit to it, don't do it.
And quality, Carly, like I think I always question, like I say this because I was interviewed on somebody who was doing a 7 episodes in a week podcast. It was very short and I listened to it. I don't even remember her name, but it wasn't great. And it felt very rushed and it felt like high volume versus quality. And I think that that's something to maybe for your listeners to play against is like, could I do 2 a week or 1 a week that are better than just like cranking out 5 terrible ones that are people aren't going to continue to listen? You know, I think that's another variable to think of.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like I'm listening to you guys' episodes, obviously a whole week. And when you're talking about, what's his name, the essay
Dope
writer,
shit. Cole Schaefer.
that episode. Exactly. Like,
Make
what are you
dope
putting
shit.
out?
Make dope
Exactly.
podcasts.
Yes. Don't put out the BS things that people are like, what is this? You know, like this is a waste of my time. Everybody's time is precious. Put out the good stuff.
Right.
Yes. It's ringing so true. So great advice on that front. Was there any unexpected benefits that you guys got from starting this podcast when, of course, yes, Jenny's already agreeing.
We got to interview, and especially I think in our last show in Soulful MBA, which was our first podcast, we got like people coming to us that we didn't ever expect to come to us for interviews. Like maybe it was the early phases of this show. I don't even know anymore, Sandy, but like Martha Beck's team reached out, and like the guy who wrote, Gay Hendricks, who wrote like The Big Leap. Like we just had all these like sort of like famous thinkers and people reach out to come onto our show. And we're like, really? You want to come? You know, like that's cool. Sure. And so we got to network. I think it's like a much bigger networking opportunity than most people realize. If you do have a show that at least sometimes has guests, like the relationships from that process, I think we were not expecting.
And the goal that happens like after the show and you're like, okay, and it ends, you know, and the recording is stopped, and like those conversations, and they may ask about our software, or we may learn about something that like the collaborations that start to come. I don't know that I expected that. And so there's also that networking aspect of it. Like it's really amazing to spend an hour with someone just chit-chatting, right? Like even for you, like obviously we've used WEP for a long time, but I've not actually ever talked to you, and you're in my same city. And like, it's just really special to spend that hour with someone that you would never normally meet. And then you've got like, it's just like the network effect, right? Like it's just one more person in your sphere of influence who can, you know, you might refer, like we always refer people to you, but like now we're more likely to, because we actually personally know you after this interview.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. Because it's like when you meet somebody, things just instantly happen. It's like email, online. It's just like a delayed process to get anything done, really, right? It's back and forth, and
this is immediate.
Yes, it's immediate. You see someone, hey, what's your number? Hey, let's do this. Okay, let's go for coffee next week. Bam, done. It's ready to roll.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm loving these video ones too, because I just feel like we're connecting like so much faster, and it's going to be amazing for people to see us. And yeah, so when you're deciding on this type of format, how did you guys decide to go with interviews? Because you guys are a team, right? So you could basically do episodes on your own forever. What was that distinguishing between like, okay, we're going to do both of these types of styles of podcasts?
I think it was obviously the network, like just to connect with other people. Also, we don't know everything. I know, shocker. To bring experts into our realm and to teach, you know, like you on podcasts and growing a podcast and using that as part of your business, like can we bring the experts into our world and introduce them to our audience? But really, I mean, and it's storytelling, right? We all want to be great storytellers. So if we know, we're really big on interviewing female founders and their experience. And so it's also super enjoyable, right? So I think we just, and it also changes it up. Like as you're listening to the podcast, you don't really know if it's going to be us ranting back and forth with each other, or we're going to bring some really cool, interesting person to the show.
Yeah. Do you ever have a tough time finding or like saying no to people that aren't really a good fit? Or do you think that everybody could be?
Not anymore.
No, we say no all the time. We don't do it. Yeah, they usually come into our team's inbox and like our team knows, like usually they just like say no for us without even running it by us. And sometimes if they think it might be a good fit, but we almost never accept cold pitches of people to come onto our show. Like unless it's, like an author that both of us like,
Unless it's Martha Beck.
yeah, like recognize and understand. We spent a lot of time, especially early on when we were having a lot of guest episodes. Like we used to have this giant spreadsheet of like our dream podcast guests. And it's like, like all of the top
Michelle
100
Obama.
most famous women in the world, basically. And so like we just had a process for periodically reaching out to them as well. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a high bar and, we don't have a giant show and it's not, we're not like Joe Rogan, although happy to become Joe Rogan one day. But like it doesn't, but still it's like, I think that guests really understand the value of coming onto a podcast because of that intense, like nurturing relationship that happens between a podcast, their hosts and their audience. Like people really want to be a part of it. So we get pitched, I would say probably, I don't know, many times a week on average. And we just don't even like all these people who are like, I left Wall Street after working at these 5 places and now I've got a YouTube channel. Like we don't ever let those people onto our show.
The people who you're talking about, the people who are cold pitching us have something to sell. Like they've got like a promotional person who's out reaching out to these podcasts to pitch their client. And not to say that we'll always say no, but generally they're either in conflict or there's like this ulterior motive to sell something to our audience, right? And it just feels kind of icky. And so unless that person has a great story to tell or has, as I said, like a really interesting expertise to bring to us or an experience or something, but if it's just like you're a copywriter or a business coach, you're not going to get on, right? So we do have a super, super high bar. Yeah, I don't know. It's just like, I don't know. It just doesn't fit. Like we want to be like a really memorable episode. And you talking about, we actually did a few interviews where we didn't even air it because the person was so boring. And
yeah, that's awkward.
We don't want that. We won't do that again. Yeah. No.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they write in and they're like, I haven't seen my episode published. Like, sorry, it ended up not being a good fit or something, or maybe a little white lie, like the file was corrupted or something. And then like, oh, sorry, we don't have any more time to record. I mean, we're protective of our audience, and our show is like a sacred space for us. And it's like our little corner of the universe where we have the important conversations that we want to have, whether they're with each other or with someone that we've curated to be on the show.
Yeah, but I mean, at this point, you guys already know, like, it's going to feel like something inside of you, like, this is not going to align with whatever our listeners want to hear. No, thank you. So it's awesome to be brave enough to say, like, no, thank you. Moving on. There's somebody else out there. Trust that you're going to find the right people. Don't just hop on anybody's bandwagon and just, see where it goes, because it might not end in a good place.
Yeah.
Oh, man. But you guys are awesome. Like, I love the comedy that you bring into the show too. Like I always say, things that draw me to hosts is their authenticity. Like things that are really real, vulnerable, raw, and funny. Like those things are really the top of my list of things. But how do you guys measure the success of your show? Like, is it community driven? Is it metrics driven? What do you guys focus on when you see, okay, we're in the right direction with this. This is where we're going to go. This is what's telling us yes.
For sure, it's metrics driven. We're always looking at downloads, number of listeners, listens, and so on. But I think the metric, one of them is like when I get on a coaching call, and the first question that we get from our clients is about something we did, like dope shit, right? So we open up the coaching call, and someone like puts up their hand, and they're like, "I want to make dope shit." Like, okay, right? So how many of our clients are commenting on the episode? And then how many text messages or DMs do I get? Like, oh my God, I love dope shit. Or, oh my God, I love the bullshitting episode. Like women need to bullshit more. That's it's connecting, and people are like, yeah, or like on Twitter or LinkedIn or wherever we post it, we're like, oh my God, thank you for saying this. And I think that for me is the metric, is the response from, usually they're people that we know, but no, that's not true. We get people on Instagram or wherever saying, oh my God, this was such a good episode. That's what I'm really looking for to measure it.
Yeah, I mean, I will say just like we in 2019 decided that our podcast, we do this every year, like this big audacious goals workshop, either with each other or with our clients or both. And at the end of 2019, we're like, okay, we're going to focus on 2020 being the year of the podcast. And like all of our goals for 2020 that Sandy and I came up with were podcast goals. And then, of course, we all know what happened. And our company, our software company exploded that year. And so like our team, like grew from like 3.5 to like 23 people within 2 months. Like it just like the podcast kind of got like, I don't think we actually set it aside at all. We might have missed some episodes that year, but we kind of like kept it going on a lifeline because it just couldn't be, we were working 20 hours a day. And so we couldn't prioritize growing the show. And I think we're finally getting back to that place again, like 3 years later, 4 years later. Oh my gosh, it's been a long time. Where like all of a sudden the show, like our podcasting life is becoming a big priority again because like our companies are stable and like separate and they're on a good trajectory and we don't have like a lot of chaos in the rest of our businesses. And so to me, like downloads are a huge piece of that. Like, can we grow our audience? And then also like, can we grow the caliber of guests that we're getting? Can we maybe increase the volume of like the number of episodes per week? Like all of those metrics are important as well. But I think like, to me, it's not just that, it's also like, are we creating work that's changing someone's life? Like it sounds so cliche, but it's also like so many business, especially women in business podcasts are such bullshit. Like they're just like carbon copies of one another and there's no useful information. And like Sandy and I have been at this for like 10 years now. We've like made many millions of dollars. We have a lot of war stories. And I think it's also like, we don't hear a lot of what we talk about on our show. We can't listen to it anywhere else. So I think there's a real need in the world and in the business world to have these kinds of conversations. And since no one else is doing it, I also feel like we have an ethical obligation to do it. And that's also how I measure our success. Like if people are really moved by what we're doing or their life is changed in some way, then that's success to me.
The other metric, I don't know if that's a metric, it's like intangible. It's like, are we creating a safe topic, as in like boring that everyone else is doing? When we have a topic and we're like, oh, should we say this? Those are the best episodes. So if there's a little bit of fear of like, I don't know, like who's going to be angered by this? Who's going to like make a comment at us? Those are always the best episodes. They're the most scary ones to produce or to record. And we always have a moment of like, should we? But they're always the ones that people resonate with. And I think to just beyond what Jeni just said, like that's how I know that we're putting out something that's impactful and changing people's lives and having these conversations. And just, I don't know what it was, maybe, I don't even know how long, a few months ago, Jeni had this phrase like, let's say the quiet parts out loud. And that's when we started being a little bit more bold with the topics, a little bit more curse words, more like telling stories that maybe will upset somebody, like the people pleasing for anyone who's been raised female is strong, right? And like, if we just put out safe topics, no one's going to say anything. No one's going to criticize us, but really no one's going to listen for very long. So we're stepping into this new side of ourselves to say the quiet parts, the Slack conversations, the like back and forth, like angry conversations or whatever it may be. We're really stepping into saying that out loud because nobody is saying that. Nobody is talking about the topics we are around women in business.
Yeah. And I mean, you guys, like I've went to look for you on Instagram, right? Like obviously that's the first place we go. And I'm like, well, this is interesting. They've moved. So I've actually found your episode where you're talking about we're done with Instagram. We're going into Twitter, this weird wide world. And literally, I 100% relate with you guys because I've been venturing back into Twitter and all those things and things, the landscape there has changed. I've never quite understood it. I mean, X, it's not even Twitter anymore. Like all these crazy ways of thinking and people making these exactly what you guys, when you said it in that episode, I'm like, that is how I feel. People are saying these crazy things. They are putting out so much information. Like I made $1 million on this. I sold this. And I'm like, well, I could probably say those things, but I don't know if I should be saying those things. Like exactly those same feelings. So you guys are being like so brave doing those things. And I mean, say stuff that's provoking that people are going to comment on and then don't care if they are fighting back, like, geez, that is a fine line. Like you said, for a woman, people pleaser, a person who kind of just wants to not cry because somebody said something mean, all those things.
Well, I think that for females, we've been just told, like, you keep the peace, like make sure everybody's happy with you. You make sure everyone's okay, take care of them before you. And that absolutely 1,000% doesn't work in business, and it doesn't work as a podcaster, or it's just like boring as shit. Right. So I think that this podcasting can be a way to kind of trial that and like, let me just put something out like I believe strongly, and let me be okay with the reaction, good and bad, right? But let me plant my flag and like own this space and these thoughts and these opinions, and like practice being okay with all the different reactions that are going to come at you, because it's going to happen. And actually we're at a place where it's like, yes, somebody hated us. We're celebrating those trolly, usually men that are commenting about you guys are useless or whatever. Fine. But I just think for any women listening, think about where you are holding back for fear of judgment, where you are looking. This is the other thing we've had to learn is like, of course we want downloads and of course we want people to listen, but our decision around the podcast is not driven for external validation. Right? We're not doing things so people can say, oh, good girl. Oh, you're so good. Oh, you're so, no, we are, you know what? Like, it's so different. It's a total flip to be like, what do I want to say? What do I want to express? What do I want to bring to this world versus like, what do people want me to say, or what do they expect me to say?
Exactly. But it's such a mindset shift. Like, you have to catch yourself the whole time. Like, stop thinking like that. Go for it. It's going to be scary anyways, so might as well do it either way, right? When the same thing when it comes to your podcast, like, we're always so finicky about, oh, it's going to be perfect like this. Oh, I'm so scared to put it out if it's not ready, if I don't have the right, camera or whatever. What if I change my mind? What if I pivot? What if I switch? But you guys are awesome at that because you've went through this process, even though it was not easy. It was tough. It was coming at you from all sides. So what kind of advice do you have for our listeners if they find themselves at a place where they feel like maybe they're creating not as dope shit as they should be? How can they rebrand? How can they pivot and make a new direction for themselves? And what's your advice to start on that?
Well, I'll just say that everyone creates terrible content when they're first starting. Like, every single creator does that. And so you have to work. The only way out is through. And like, the only way you get to be good at podcasting or anything else is by being bad at it. Right. So I think that's the simplest thing. And I mean, I think with podcasting, like, the quality of the audio does matter. And so investing in an inexpensive microphone is important, but like, nothing else matters at all. And like, everything else you can do basically for free. When you're first starting out, you don't need any other resources. It's the cheapest thing to start. And it's so quick compared to other kinds of content creation. Like, if you're going to become a YouTuber, it's like a whole other story. Like, this is so much easier and faster. But I would also just say that, like, I think you're also alluding to the fact that we rebranded. So we've rebranded our show, and we've also like rebranded our software company, and we created a new coaching business out of like the ashes of that process too. And like, that's just also part of being a creator, is like evolving and changing, because the way people consume content is constantly changing. The way the social media like algorithms work is constantly changing. And part of being successful is being adaptive. So it's just like part of your actual job is to do that. And then on this like perfectionism piece that I think you're also alluding to, I think, and Sandy can speak to this better than I can, about like women being like intensely perfectionistic about everything that they put out. But I think that there's some validity into like holding yourself to a high standard, but it should be about the ideas and less about like the prettiness of it, if that makes sense. Like, let's not worry about the package around the idea being perfect. Let's actually worry about the fact, have you like thought this through? Have you like taken the time and done research on this topic? Like, do you have a point of view? Like, that's more important to me, then like, is the package nice? And is your show art perfect? And, like, is the title the right, like, that's like less important to everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Women get really hung up on the logo and the colors and the like, should I use this platform or that platform? Like they get hung up on the perfectionist side of like all the parts, but they forget about like what Jeni's saying, the idea, the content, the purpose, the why. And that's what needs to be dope shit. And the other stuff can totally suck for a little while until you get get some episodes under your belt and get a clear understanding of who you are and what you're doing. And you can always improve that. You can always change that. I'm always like in awe of the digital world because I used to have a brick and mortar store. And if we wanted to change anything, it was so freaking painful. And like, you can change a color and you can change a title and you can change a name and a logo and or a price or whatever. And it's so instantaneous. And I think that a lot of women will stay with the things that like, they'll take a lot of time to put work out into the world because of perfectionistic thinking. And I think that they just need to realize like it's the work, like focus on the work and the people that you're going to reach as opposed to the way that it looks. And I think they're trying to avoid negative emotion by putting it out in the world. Like, what if someone says something to me? So I'm going to work really hard and like just keep, procrastinating and making it better. So nobody will give me a negative comment. And it's just like that world doesn't work that way. You're going to get them. So the faster you can get to the place where you can put out great ideas and great content and get used to the idea that there's going to be some people who maybe don't like you so much. It's like hard either way. So, pick your poison. Which way do you want to go? Get the idea out there and deal with the comments and the judgments.
Yeah. I think those things are all, it's nice distractions because it keeps you from doing the work in the first place.
Feel it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it's almost worse in the end because then you've put in all this effort into what you created. And then if you get the feedback that you don't want, it's like, oh, what about all this work I spend on it? Like if you had put it out faster, less time, then you're like, okay, that makes sense. And it's kind of a vicious cycle in the end, but hey, it's fun too. I mean, it's challenging when you think about it because as a business owner or a software creator, maybe your strong suit isn't content to begin with. Like some people, that is their job, content. That is what they're doing as a business, where others like, that wasn't my job to begin with, right? But it kind of, I had to learn, I had to teach myself all these things and soak up so much information on what to do. And then if you take any breaks, for me, I took a break with the kids, like having kids and then coming back into the world. I'm like, oh, where do I start? It's so overwhelming, but like you said, just learn, just be able to adapt, just get in there and start. That's the key. Oh man. So looking forward, what do you guys have planned next for the podcast or what are your goals coming up?
Jeni. Well, that's a big question. We are like having a lot of conversations about what that looks like. Cause like I said, I think we're in a stage right now where podcasting is kind of becoming more elevated in our list of priorities. And so what changes that's going to make for our show, we don't know yet, but I mean, just getting better. Like that's like what's on the horizon is getting better. And like, maybe it means, I don't know, more episodes, or maybe it means like new little mini series of episodes in addition to our regular, like we haven't sorted the details of that out yet, but it's just a bigger emphasis. Like, I think that's so interesting. We've been doing this since 2016. It's now like we're heading into 2024 before we know it. And like, it's still such an important part of our lives. And I think it just goes to show like, this is an industry that is not going anywhere. Like it's just continuing to grow and be more and more embedded in sort of like the daily lives of so many people in the world. And that's amazing. So
yeah, totally. Well, this is the part where we go into our quick fire 4. It's going to be fun. I'm just going to ask you some questions and then you just say whatever pops to mind. So the first one is, how has podcasting changed the way you do business and or life?
You want to do this one, Sandy?
Sure. I think that the way that it's changed the way we do business is that we are able to promote every single week, both of our companies. We're able to talk about ideas and concepts that we teach. I think it's it's really helped evolve us as thinkers because we have to come up with concepts or episode topics every week. So I think that it has only made us better business women, and it has made us, honestly, a lot of money.
What are the top 3 tools you use as a podcaster?
Wow.
You have to say
Your
WEP.
beautiful service, Carly, is one of them. And then, I mean, I think like the tools are kind of irrelevant. Like we've switched, like we used to record our show on, what was that free tool, Sandy, that we both used? Like, is it? It's
Odyssey?
not Audacity.
Oh,
Audacity?
That was
Audacity,
a long time
maybe.
ago.
Like we used
Maybe
to use
it was
Audacity.
Yeah, it was like
it's like
totally
free, and then we
archaic.
used Zoom, and now we use Transistor, and I don't know how long we'll do.
Zencaster.
Zencaster and Transistor. Like it just doesn't matter. Like I think the tools, like that would be my answer to this question, is like the tools don't matter at all. Like just pick a tool and use the tool. It doesn't matter.
Can I
Don't
add
be
one
overwhelmed.
caveat to that? The tools may not matter, but one of the things that we are doing differently is we're using private podcasts a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And so all of our coaching calls that we do, we put those recordings on a private podcast that only paid clients can access. And so that has really changed. I'm going to make this my answer to question 1. That has changed our business because the accessibility to recorded, like the replays of the coaching calls are so easy. You know how easy it is we're all podcast listeners. You can just like in the car driving, folding laundry, going on a walk, whatever, you can have access to that instead of having to sit in front of a screen and watch a call that you missed. You can just pop your earbuds in. So I think so when you are choosing tools, I think that's one thing to consider if you do run any kind of business where you might want to create a private podcast. I mean, there's many reasons for a private podcast. That's the way we use it. I think that's a super cool aspect or a feature of some of the tools.
Yes, that's great to know. We haven't talked about that on the show yet. So thanks, Sandy. Is that your non-negotiable investment that you're doing? What would that be? Do you have one, Jeni?
In the podcast, I mean, I think having good microphones, like I said, matters a lot. Like I think a lot of people especially in those like how to start a podcast blog post talk about that damn Blue Yeti microphone. And I think that's like the worst microphone. And I think why is this mentioned in like every how to start a podcast episode or
I don't know why.
blog post on the internet? It's like literally the worst. All those USB microphones are terrible. So that's what I would say.
Honestly, I think it's because those things, they were pretty and like the look like that people use in like, or even in like stock photography, you'd see them everywhere. So it's like, oh, that must be, what people are doing. And obviously the price point and all those things. But I mean, even before the show, when your AirPods accidentally connected, you could totally hear the difference. Like people don't talk about that a lot. And especially if you're a guest on someone's show too, sometimes you don't have a setup, and then you're throwing on those headphones and you're sounding a little different than the host.
Yeah.
So yes, I agree. Sound is good to have an investment in. Okay, our final one. I love this one because I see so many awesome answers. If money and time are not a factor, what would you be next for your podcast?
We'd start a new one.
Exciting to say out loud.
Say it.
I think so, like serialized podcast. Like there's a lot of kind of investigative journalism style podcasting that we'd like to do, kind of picking up on like in the business world. Like because we come from the world of startups, it's such a shit show. We've like primarily bootstrapped our company, but we've been in the world of fundraising and in the world of accelerators, and like the horrifying things that go on are so juicy and so interesting. I think people in the rest of our culture have no idea what goes on in businesses. And so I think something like that, like a serialized investigative kind of podcast where we're like getting like down and dirty and interviewing lots of people and like finding evidence and sharing it on our show.
I would have like a team like like the Serial podcast, and they have like a team of like 40 people doing all this investigative stuff, and they have custom artwork. They've got artists, and then they've got like people making the music for their intro. Like that. I want that. I don't want to work with 40 people, but I would love to have something that takes a long time to like research and create, and be really thorough and like expose a part of the world that nobody gets to see. That's what I want to do.
It's like a big production almost,
like Scamanda, but for business.
Yes.
I'm just like thinking of those things like how come, why haven't people seen it? Is it because people don't talk about it, or is it because people aren't asking the right questions to the right people?
They're not, no one's talking about it.
It's a world that very few people actually have insight into. And the people who do have insight into, like, there's a very disparate power dynamic between investors and like people with resources to fund companies, and then like all the people that work in those companies. And then like the public has no idea that most of like the startups that we see as successful, the famous companies that have been birthed in the last 20 years, like are hemorrhaging money. But we are all women who run real businesses that have to like be profitable, and we have to understand our margins. And this world is not like that. Like, in fact, it's a world where making profit is like a detrimental thing. Like, it's about how fast you can grow your market share. And like, it's not it's like the antithesis of business. It's like an unbusiness. And yet we use all these tools, and, you know, like we ride in Ubers, and we like get door delivery, like meals for dinner. And like, we just participate, and we use online teaching platforms that maybe make $60 million a year, but fundraised $550 million in the same year. So like, is that really success? Like, no one's talking about it because as humans, I think we're really bad at understanding complex problems or long-term consequences. But yet, like, this is our economy. This will have long-term consequences for us and our children. And I think Sandy and I have had like this like kind of insider peek into this world, and it's horrifying. And I feel like we have a responsibility to talk about it.
Yeah. When we do talk about it with our coaching clients or with like, you know, a little bit on the podcast, people will be like, what are you talking? Like, and it's like, yes, we got demonized because we're a profitable company. Like, what doesn't make any sense? I know it doesn't make any sense. And I feel like I want to bring those like things that don't make sense to the public, like shine some light on them, because that is that is the world. And it's so frustrating. And there's so many good stories, and it totally is a scamanda for
it's like so juicy what happens in those situations. Like the stories we've just like barely been involved in that world, and like the stories like that we've witnessed and that our kind of close circle has witnessed are like worthy of like Netflix series. Like there's so much good stuff in there.
Mm-hmm. I want to get Elizabeth Holmes on the phone. Yeah. Like, let's like talk to her, you know? Mm-hmm. That's what I would do.
Gosh. And I mean, like, even like, as you're saying that, shining a light on it, teaching to people what it means to have a real profitable business, because I've seen younger generations coming up and thinking that raising money and using your investors' money as like a piggy bank or whatever they do is the standard. Like then their business fails when they sell, and then they sell it. And then it's like, oh yeah, you know, we had a great learning experience. I'm like, but you just used somebody else's money to kind of play with, and then wipe, you know, oh yeah, we learned a lot. I'm like, how is this accepted? Like
those stories. Yes.
There's so many of them. And then they'll go just do it again. Like, and that's like, just because if you've raised money once, you're just much more likely to be able to raise a second time, regardless of how successful your company was. And so like, and there's also like the demographic issues of who's able to raise and who isn't. Right. So like, just like, there's, like, this is a bizarre thing that's come about in our culture. And I think we're not really we just sort of accept it as normal and as right. And it, like, for people like us, like Sandy and I have such like a huge ethical problem with it. And we couldn't participate in it. Like, we just actually couldn't as human beings participate in it, because we actually sat there and looked at what that would mean. Like, what would that do to our customers, our audience, like to investors, like to like it's not something that I would ever have been proud of. So I think that anyway, that's worth talking about. And
you guys are found a gold mine there. I would tune in.
Yeah,
you've got me there. It's the real stuff.
It's coming.
The raw stuff.
One day it's coming.
Hey, don't get any investors to sponsor that show. Oh my gosh, you guys. Well, this has been an incredible conversation. I mean, I feel like we've hit some really awesome topics and advice out the wazoo for people tuning in and just thinking about this whole podcast world and how it's changing and shifting. So thank you so much for all that you've shared. And I am so excited to, hear where you guys go next. I will be sitting on the edge of my seat for all that you have to offer this world.
Thank you, Carly.
Thank you, Carly. This has been great.
Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next time.